Welcome to In Real Life Wellbeing for Women. I'm your host, Elizabeth Simpson, and this is your space for science-based strategies, coaching tools, and thoughtful conversations created for real women living real lives. Your wellbeing deserves attention, not when you reach crisis point, but now. So take this moment, not for your to-do list, but for you. Hi and welcome. Today's episode is all about habits, specifically why so many of us struggle to stick with them and what the research really says about making them last. Because if you've ever found yourself thinking, I know what I want to do, but why can't I keep it up? Or maybe I can start strong and then it just kind of disappears. Or why do I always lose momentum when things get busy? Obviously, you're not alone with this. This is such a common experience, especially for women balancing a lot. Work, family, invisible mental load, emotional care of others, and even just a general overwhelm of life. So here's what happens. You decide to make a change. You're clear on what you want. Maybe it's journaling in the morning, walking after lunch, reducing screen time, or finally building a better bedtime routine. You start strong for a day or two, maybe even a week. But then your energy dips, someone needs you, your sleep is off, work takes over, and just like that, this new amazing habit that you had great intentions for slips away. And the most frustrating part, you know the habit matters to you. And it's not that you don't care, it's that consistency feels impossible to maintain. Like something you should try harder at to hold on to, something that other people can do, but you can't. It's just like motivation, that some people have more motivation and you are the person that lacks it. But that's not the case. The problem isn't motivation, and it's not lack of willpower or even consistency. It's that the strategies most of us have been taught, they rely too much on motivation and consistency, and not enough on what actually happens to build a habit in real life. That's what we'll be exploring today. We'll look at the science behind tiny habits and sustainable change, why traditional advice on consistency often misses the mark, and how to build habits that flex with your life instead of failing the moment things get hard. This isn't about doing more. It's about making small, intentional choices that support your well-being, no matter what the week brings you. Let's start with the why and the science of habit formation. So something we've all been told and we all feel from our early years is that to make a habit, you just need more motivation. You need to want it more, push harder, care more. But motivation, as helpful as it can be at times, is actually the most unreliable part of habit formation. In behavioural science, motivation is seen as temporary and variable. It depends on your mood, your energy, and your circumstances. It comes and it goes. And when your new habit depends on motivation, that means that your habits come and go too. Instead, what actually builds lasting habits, especially the ones that support well-being, is something much more reliable, and that's momentum. We all consider that motivation is what gets you started, but momentum is what keeps you going. BJ Fogg's behavioural model is a helpful framework here. He says that before a behaviour is to happen, you need three things at the same time. Motivation, that's your desire to do it. Ability, how easy it is to do. And a prompt, the cue or the trigger that reminds you to act. But here's the key. When motivation is low, and it will be, the behaviour will still happen if it's easy enough and well cued. So instead of relying on motivation alone, you can design habits that are so small and so well anchored, they almost happen on autopilot. And the science also shows that as you start doing something because you've taken on the momentum of doing it, motivation then builds. And that's where Charles Duhigg's habit loop comes in. So this is cue, routine, then reward. This is the neuroscience behind building automatic behaviours. And study shows that the more often a small action is paired with the same cue in the same context, the stronger the neuro connections become. And over time, your brain starts doing it without needing to think. This process is called automaticity. And that's critical to Wendy Wood's research too, because she found that up to 40% of our daily behaviors are habits that are done without deliberate intention because they've been repeated often enough in a consistent context. And it's that context that really matters. Now, I'm sure if you think back to any behaviors that you do, that you can think back to when they were really tiny and they built over time and they just become second nature and just part of your day. Now, here's where micro habits come in. When you try to change too much too quickly, the habits need more energy, more planning, and motivation. But when you scale the actions right down in the beginning to even just 30 seconds, it becomes easier to repeat. And repetition is what helps build that habit strength. So this could be something like having 3 mindful breaths while the kettle's boiling, stretching for 30 seconds after brushing your teeth, writing 1 sentence in a journal after checking your emails. Now, this may sound really small, even too small, but that is the point. As you know from the other habits you have going on in your life, 40% of those habits are unintentional. The other 60% you've worked on, you've built them over time to become the person you are in the kind of days that you plan to do. So starting really small allows you to set that intention, and you know from doing those mindful breaths every day, suddenly you're not just doing it while you boil the kettle that one time. You'll find yourself embedding them more and more into your day, and the habit will allow to grow. Whereas if you were to plan to do a half an hour meditation every day, that would be more challenging to just get on and start. Same for the stretching for 30 seconds. You've done the 30-second stretch, but actually, over time, it will build and build. And when you've got that momentum, that motivation to keep going and building will stick with you. So even though it feels small, keep on going so that the momentum builds. And then as you have that momentum, motivation pushes you forward to continue in this direction that supports your identity of who you are and who you want to be. Now, one of the other important aspects of this is identity. So just as I've mentioned, if you're embedding these into your days, it's probably because it's about who you are and who you want to be. So for example, you may consider yourself as a novice in terms of physical activity. But identifying as I am a runner supports you in prioritizing that activity. I'm someone who cares for their well-being. So prioritizing activities that support well-being come second nature to me. If it's to do with building activities around crafting, for example, because you want to do more leisure activity, saying I am a crafter supports you in having your tools and your resources handy so that you can just get on and do that activity, removing those friction points so that that habit can build slowly, small in the beginning, but over time will snowball into something that supports this identity that you've labeled. And with that, there are positive emotions that when you're doing things that you have chosen to do and it's really important to you, even the smallest of celebrations that go with them in completing that habit send signals to your brain that this is worth repeating. So it's not just the behavior that we're looking to do, it's the meaning behind it as well, and that emotional signal that this really matters to me. Now, before we move on to how to actually play this out, I want to offer an important caveat, and this one, it doesn't get said enough. I get really frustrated when I hear advice about habits and positive change, and the headline is consistency. So you're building a habit and you've been told you've got to be consistent in this. You've got to repeat this habit every day. And while that's valid in theory and supported by behavioural science, that behavioural science is under controlled conditions and it doesn't reflect real life for real women. You can design the most elegant, friction-free, beautiful stacked habit in the world. But when you're also managing a family, job, mental load, or your own shifting energy and hormones, physiological landscape, that habit might not still happen every day. And that can kind of bring up feelings of reduced self-worth or frustration, reduced confidence, feelings of failure. But it's actually just reality. Just because we've been told by somebody we should do something consistently in the same way so that it builds a habit, and we can't do that because real life is real life, we shouldn't have to feel bad that we can't stick to it. Women's bodies go through real physiological fluctuations. So, for example, menstrual cycles and perimenopause and beyond, they affect energy, mood, and physical capacity. For example, you might lift heavier weights during the middle of your cycle and then struggle to maintain the same performance later in the month. That's not inconsistency, that's just biology. Hormonal changes can impact everything from sleep to appetite to motivation. And laid on top of that, the day to day flexibility that's often required because you are likely the one managing the mental admin of the household, the planning, the scheduling, the caring, all stack up to a situation, a real world landscape that doesn't allow for this consistency that these models talk about. Okay, so consistency isn't about doing the same action at exactly the same time, no matter what. Consistency is about intentionality. It's the decision to keep the area of your well-being in focus, to say, this matters to me and I will care about it with flexibility, with adaptation, and with self-compassion. So maybe the exact habit shift day to day. Maybe some days it's strength training and others it's a gentle walk. Maybe one week it's writing a journal and the next it's voice notes on your phone. Whatever the change and adaptation of that habit, it's still demonstrating a consistency. Now, you can be consistent in terms of these micro habits and building onto current habits, but also some days that just will not happen, and that is absolutely fine. So there are really two paths here. You can make your habit so it anchors into an automatic behavior that it survives no matter what. So, like brushing your teeth and stretching. Or you build a compassionate contingency. So that's when when the original plan falls through because life happens, there's also an alternative to support you in feeling consistent, being consistent, and having those positive emotions that you really are putting this important thing first and in the forefront of your mind within your day or week whenever it needs to happen for you. So your design for your habits don't have to fit into your life, but they need to respect the way your life works, which is very unique to everybody else's. Okay, let's move on to an actionable tool to support you in this. So, to bring this into real life, I would like you to think about one area in life that you can focus on, so a specific area, in order to design a goal around. Now, before you switch off, I am not talking about a SMART goal. It's rather similar, but I think that the SMART goal setting activity can be tweaked to really support the real world experience of women. So take a moment to consider what area of your well-being or your daily life could use a new way of doing things. Having identified the specific area you're looking at, we now want to narrow this down even further. So I want you to get your focus as tiny as possible. So what exactly is it about this situation that's not working for you now? And what in your ideal world would you want it to look like so it is different? So you've identified your big picture, and we need to bring it right down to what exactly is it about that requires your focus, and zoom in on that. Because when you define what you actually want to change, your next steps can be built from there. And next, let's keep the focus on actions. Instead of thinking about what you want to achieve, focus on what you want to do. Because even if the results are uncertain, your actions can still happen. So it's about choosing behaviors, not outcomes. And this is where this idea of planning steps away from the SMART model. We're not measuring anything. If you want to measure something, you're measuring, did I do the behavior? We're not looking for how many of this did I do? How many times did I do it? We simply want to say what the thing is you're doing. So it is, I will be walking, running, writing, helping, sitting, meditating, relaxing, journaling. Whatever that action word is, that's what you need to think about here. What is the behavior you're going to do that supports this well-being area? And then next, we're going to bring this into the reality of our lives. Now, again, I don't like the SMART framework where it uses the word realistic, because it suggests that you're looking at things from through rose-tinted glasses, and you're not. This isn't about suggesting your ideas are wrong and you need to be more realistic about them. This is me saying, but in reality of life, what actually happens? So you've got this great idea, this specific thing you want to do. It's an action you're going to be doing. And then in the context of your real life, what happens? So what does your morning look like? What does your evening look like? What are your commitments? Where does this thing fit into your day or your week? And then what happens around that? So do you know that your energy dips at certain points of your cycle? You know that other responsibilities and commitments happen regularly, or there are unforeseen things that happen spontaneously or sporadically. They happen, they get in the way of your plans regularly. So what are those things? So we can then consider contingencies around those things that happen in real life. Okay, so our last thing is we've identified the reality of what life looks like. So now it comes down to those triggers. And the triggers are, if I have the morning to myself, I do this. And then the next trigger is, if the children wake up early, this is the alternative. And then another trigger would be, if I don't work on a Friday, I will do this. If I have family members visiting, I will do such and such. So you identify exactly what happens in real life, and you've identified what you will do in those situations. So you've stepped away from that consistency model of doing everything the same every single day, when you know that real life doesn't allow for that. And you've said, well, that's fine. I know that real life happens. And so I know exactly what I will do when real life happens in the context of my life. So this allows you to build and focus on that intention, and that intention stays consistent. But then you're flexible with how those actions happen. And you do this with self-kindness to show that you're growing, doing it with something that is really meaningful to you. Okay, now, just hopefully in your mind, you've built out this wonderful goal setting activity. You have a really gentle and specific goal that will support you. And you've identified how you do this in the context of your real life. I just want to remind you of a couple of points. The first one is there's no such thing as perfect repetition. So if you find yourself falling back into those traps of having to do something exactly the same way or building on it in exactly the same way that other people might do, try to step away from that kind of mindset. This is about your real life and doing things that actually work for you. So you really do make those improvements. And adapt the habit so it matches your energy and circumstances. You've identified these triggers that happen, and you might not realize there are other triggers. Go back to the drawing board, have a look at the triggers, and consider what alternatives could be placed so that you feel like you're working towards this activity with positivity rather than getting frustrated that life has happened and got in your way again. And don't forget to reinforce with your identity. So telling yourself, I am someone who checks in with myself. I care about how I feel, even on busy days. I put my physical health and my emotional health or my psychological well-being first before I manage everybody else's needs. Whatever that thing is that you need to anchor those habits to, keep that with you, even as you're doing the activities and as you reflect on those activities. So whatever the tiny habit you choose today, return to it with gentleness. Not because it's urgent, not because you should, but because it reflects something true about how you care for yourself. Okay, so today we explored why your new habits might not be sticking and why that's not a reflection of your motivation, your worth, or your effort. Instead, we looked at the science behind habit formation and how momentum, not perfection, is what's really required. We walked through a gentle, woman-centered way to build small, flexible habits that start from your real life, not someone else's idea of what consistency should look like. You know how to get specific, how to make tiny and actionable goals, about being honest about the realities of your week and your day, and choosing clear, compassionate triggers and identifying the actions that go with it to support you in really working towards those goals that are important to you. And most importantly, you learned that habits don't have to be daily to be durable. They don't have to be perfect to be powerful. Because when you honor your needs, your energy, and your lived experiences, you are showing up for you, not by doing more, by doing what matters to you. And that's what sustainable well-being looks like. So thank you for joining me on Real Life, your space for science-backed strategies, compassionate coaching tools, and honest well-being for real women. If this episode gave you something useful and supportive, feel free to share it with someone who might need to hear it too. And if you'd like to explore these ideas more deeply, coaching is a great place to start building habits that truly support your well-being, your clarity, intention, and real-life support. Because your well-being isn't a luxury, it's the foundations of health and happiness in real life.